Hello, bonjour. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sarah Simpson, Senior Communications Advisor with the Mass Casualty Commission. We have 45 minutes for questions today. You can ask one question and one follow-up. We also do have media on the line, and we know time is tight, so we'll do keep it tight, keep it quick if we can. So we can get started right off the bat. Kayla, do you want to start off?
I do, thank you. Commissioners, Kayla Hounslow with CBC National News. Thank you for taking our questions. You've certainly outlined a number of inadequacies, but can you answer this question directly for Canadians? Did the RCMP fail the public on April 18th and 19th, 2020?
I can say it no better than Officer Campbell on the stand when he apologized for failing and saying he would do better. Our concentration has been on systemic failures as opposed to blaming you, and you. He, in a very heartfelt way, said to the world that we failed you and we'll do better. And he's a high-ranking RCMP member.
Thank you. A number of your recommendations outline putting together advisory groups to study national issues and national strategies. Do we really need more studying after the Mass Casualty Commission?
Yes, we do. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say they're advisory groups. They're not more study. They're input. So what we talk about is a community-centered approach and collaborative approach. And community safety requires all the partners to be at the table and talking with one another. So it's not more study. It's how do we get this done in a good way so that it's cohesive, coherent, collaborative, and actually gets us where we want to go.
Excellent. Next question.
Hi.
Tim, go ahead.
Tim Busquet, Halifax Examiner. The report, we just heard from Ms. Zita, she praised the report on its analysis of what happened with Lisa Banfield and also the suggestions moving forward. I have a specific question, though, which is what I did not read in the report. It's long, maybe I missed it. Was anything that could be done to make Ms. Banfield whole now, specifically?
Well, we're limited, Mr. Busquet, in terms of our mandate, and of course, our mandate was to determine what happened, the causes, context, and circumstances. We spent, as you know, a lot of the report dealing with intimate partner violence, family violence, and domestic violence, and we have provided a lot of detail involving Ms. Banfield's experience, and unless you have something specific in mind, our work is over as far as our mandate is concerned. Whatever other recourse Ms. Banfield would have would be between her and her counsel, I presume. If I'm understanding your question correctly, maybe I'm not.
I suppose even just a broad statement to the public about how we as a society should be treating and dealing with Ms. Banfield. I often hear similar statements coming from judges after wrongful convictions, that sort of thing, saying we should embrace this person, we should accept them into our community, that sort of thing.
We identify her as the first victim on the 18th of April, and in no uncertain terms. Absolutely. Thank you.
Brett, go ahead.
Commissioners, thank you very much for the report. Very extensive with your recommendations, obviously. The one series of items that are missing, there's calls for funding. How much funding are we talking about? For example, we're talking about epidemic level funding. What dollar amount are we talking about here? What would you recommend?
As you mentioned, we've done very extensive report with a lot of recommendations. We didn't do a cost analysis on our recommendations. That's the job for those that are going to be picking up the recommendations and the lessons learned getting together collaboratively to determine what that will look like as they move forward. So there's a lot, as we said in our remarks, there's a lot of work left to be done and costing some of those out. One of the things I think is really important is that we did call for governments and institutions to put crime prevention and law enforcement on equal footing. And so I think if that helps at all, that is part of the formula that we would expect people to weave into rolling out our implementation plan.
And it was clear that you mentioned other reports that took place that have happened in the past that have called for reformation to the RCMP, 2007, 2020. What will happen? What needs to happen to ensure that 2023 isn't added to that list?
There's a whole section of the report on management culture in the RCMP, and there's some fairly straightforward ways in which culture can be shifted within a large organization, and we lay those out. So it's, I think, time for the RCMP to really take a look at how its culture operates. But that part of it is what we talk about as well in Volume 5. We have a whole section on everyday policing. So improving the note-taking, improving the supervision, improving overall openness and transparency in how decisions are made, in direction between advisory bodies, police boards, and so on. And so there's a number of concrete ways set out in the report for them to actually take on board, okay, we've been told this many times, but how on earth do we do it? Well, we've provided some very clear advice on that.
Heidi, go ahead.
Hi, Heidi Petracek with CTV. Just following up on that, based on the testimony you heard from RCMP commanding officers, based on all the evidence you have seen, how confident are you that the RCMP can achieve the things you were talking about with the roadmap you've provided?
I remain confident. We took a look at community safety as opposed to just policing and have made it clear. I mean, it was poignant when Addie McCollum said, I would have so much more time if I didn't have to do things I'm not comfortable with, like mental health calls. So we took a community safety approach as opposed to just policing. And I'm confident that that's going to resonate because they should be doing what they're really good at. They should be better trained at doing what they can be really good at and educated. And with a community safety integrated approach, we can carve out what they should be doing. And honestly, I see that as a potential win-win.
As a follow-up question, RCMP management, you do talk about, they need to admit mistakes. Do you think that culture change can happen based on being in policing and in the justice system?
I don't think it's only a question of do we think that it can change, it must change, and we're very clear in that. It's imperative that police leaders get on board with making meaningful change and ensuring that they are engaging others in doing so. And so it's not a matter of can they must. And we've seen many reports that have called for transformation. The federal government has made a commitment to that in the past on modernization and transformation in policing. And I think it's really important as well that this isn't just something that is directed at the RCMP in Canada. This is policing in Canada, and it's time to rethink the roles and responsibilities and how to share the responsibility of community safety and well-being for everyone.
How confident are you that your report won't join previous reports gathering dust on a government shelf somewhere? And what measures do you think should be taken to ensure that doesn't happen?
So Volume 6 of the report is called Implementation, a Shared Responsibility to Act. And what we suggest, and a number of the participants provided contribution to that recommendation, that there be a mutual accountability body that the federal governments and the provincial government set up, but that includes members from key communities, that includes representatives of those most affected, and has the responsibility to report publicly on the implementation of the recommendations. We've had commitments from governments today that the recommendations will be implemented. So the first thing they should probably do is set up that accountability body and make sure that it happens. But we've asked for transparency and accountability in the implementation of the recommendations, and we've also provided guidance or suggestions to people who are individuals in communities, who are members of community organizations, who are leaders in policing, in provincial departments and federal departments, of what they can do to start right away.
How many stakeholders, I realize that they've only had a few hours to look at it, but have you had any feedback from any stakeholders about their willingness to become involved in this oversight committee?
Just going by the proceedings, they were helpful recommendations. I think Scott McLeod, for one, said it, and others have said it. My sense of the room is they would be lining up to be part of it. The community-based organizations, the participants, surely nobody would turn down an invitation to make communities safer, given the group we've identified, police, first responders. I remain optimistic that they will, their feet will be held to the fire in a transparent way.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Jones. I'm with the Globe and Mail. And my question is around Lisa Banfield, kind of jumping off what Tim Bousquet had asked. In your report, in the executive summary, I read that the RCMP did not treat Lisa Banfield as a surviving victim of the mass casualty, and that that she wasn't treated as an important witness who required careful debriefing and someone who would need support services. Can you explain how you came to that conclusion? What factors led you to that conclusion, please?
4 interviews with the RCMP, 5 interviews, I think, with us, a lot of interviews. Her very emotional, poignant testimony before us, and her reenactment. It appears that Lisa Banfield, for 19 years, not appears, it's clear, for 19 years, was abused by her spouse, and it culminated on April 18th. And we highlight that she was clearly the first victim, and our view, as is stated in the report, that she ought to have been immediately recognized as such.
Just to follow up on that, can you explain what were the failings within the RCMP that that you noted that led her to be not treated appropriately as a victim?
No, go ahead.
So the details are laid out in the volumes, but she was not appropriately debriefed. She was an injured person who had just survived a night in the woods after quite an ordeal, and she was not interviewed in a way that we've set out would have been an appropriate way to interview someone with the kind of injuries that she'd had and the experience that she'd had. And then over time, although she had been told that she was not a suspect in any way, it became apparent that she had not been provided with the information that indeed she was being looked at, because ultimately the RCMP put forward charges against her. And so that is all set out in the report.
Adrian, go ahead.
Hello, Adrian Black with Radio Canada. There's still an unknown about the origin of the money that the perpetrator had. I think $200,000 and then $400,000. You mentioned that in the report, but I don't see any recommendation regarding financial misdealings, recommendations to FinTrack of what we've seen in other commission reports. Could you explain why?
That's a very good question. We did a thorough investigation and it accounted to the best of our ability to account for the funds that were in the possession of the perpetrator. The area of information sharing and collaboration amongst law enforcement agencies and partners, FinTrack would definitely be part of that network. They currently work closely with police on various investigations, and I would expect that with respect to our emphasis on sharing of information between law enforcement agencies and public safety partners, that they would be included in that work going forward. Thank you for your question.
Steve?
Hi, Steve McKinley from the Toronto Star. Throughout this process, there's been, the Commission has faced some criticism for its trauma-sensitive approach. And there's been allegations from lawyers, who are upset at the fact they didn't get a chance to cross-question witnesses. And they feel that that leads to a lack of trust in the Commission, a lack of trust in some of the people who were not allowed to be cross-examined on their testimonies. Looking back on it now, do you have any thoughts on how to modify, perhaps, that trauma-informed approach?
Honestly, I'm pleased that the trauma-informed approach was part of our mandate, and applying restorative principles was part of our mandate. I've been a lawyer and then a judge on the Court of Appeal for over 45 years. Day in, day out, I've dealt with witnesses. I've questioned my own witnesses. I've cross-examined witnesses. I have, as a judge, witnessed examinations and cross-examinations as appeal court judge, looked at thousands of people. Respectfully, I have some experience in how to get information from witnesses. And the default that cross-examination is the only way to get at the truth is just wrong. It's important. Don't get me wrong, it's important, and I said this in my opening remarks. If someone's trying to mislead you, yes, it's very important. But our goal as an inquiry is to set witnesses up to get the best possible information from them. If you're a lawyer and your client's being cross-examined, the typical advice is don't volunteer anything. Tell the truth, don't volunteer anything. Say yes, no, or I don't remember, if you don't remember. Obviously, to be truthful. That's not what an inquiry is all about. An inquiry is all about getting the information they have, calling them in instead of calling them out. And it's just wrong, respectfully, to say that everybody has to be cross-examined. No, everybody, we owe it to the people, the memory of the lives taken, the people of Nova Scotia and the people of Canada, to get the best information. And we got the, I'll guarantee you, and I'll guarantee the people of Nova Scotia and Canada, we got the best information because we didn't use a cookie-cutter approach, one size fits all. We took each witness and we set them up to get the best information we could from them, including every participant having the opportunity to pose, to tell us through Commission counsel, or not a great percentage of the time they of course, participant counsel questioned the witnesses, but in those cases they didn't. They had an opportunity to make sure that their questions were answered, and we set up a system for each witness, tailor-made, that got the best information from them, and I believe our report dispels any criticism in that regard. It's thorough, and I challenge anyone to suggest that we did not get all the information. We did.
On the same topic of gathering information, I noted that you the commission mentioned during the process that there were some difficulties in getting evidence that you wanted from the RCMP. There are 3 recommendations in the report that are sort of directed towards making it easier for future inquiries to access information like this. Could you talk about those a little bit and how important they are in the grand scheme of things?
Thank you. The RCMP, DOJ are frequently the subject of processes that require information from them. And we see an opportunity for the government and for its agencies to streamline how they go about cooperating with processes like this. When an inquiry is called, there should be a clear path forward for them to participate. Inquiries aren't litigation. It's a different approach to document production for an inquiry. The idea, because inquiries are specifically precluded from making findings of liability, everybody should be thinking about what is in the public interest here. And the more transparent and open that you can be in participating in the process, the better off the public is. And that's the essence of an inquiry. And so going forward, we've offered some ways for documents to be produced such that it's more organized, more clear, more transparent, and that that will assist all of those elements of machinery in the government to assist inquiries in the future, because it's clear that some improvements need to be made.
Sarah Plowman, CTV News. What's your message to politicians, police, other stakeholders who may not be willing to fully commit to your recommendations?
I'll speak certainly on the police messaging, and others hopefully will hear the same message, is that we've laid it out very clearly that there needs to be a commitment to prevention first. And I've often said throughout my 34 years in policing, when the police are called to respond, we have already collectively failed as a society. We need to get out ahead of harm and violence in the first instance. And when it does happen, we have to be really well prepared. We have to be prepared to deal with the unexpected. We have to be prepared to deal with the harm and the fallout and the impacts on communities and families. Continuing to do public safety the way we have been doing in the 21st century isn't an option. When we look at, for example, police training in Canada, we're still following a 26-week model in 2023 that has been around for I don't know how many years. I think Depot was established in the 1800s. It is insufficient in this day and age. And our politicians, our police leaders, our communities have to demand more. We have to set people up, be able to learn more, learn from past mistakes, and make changes going forward, because the status quo in policing and public safety and community safety and well-being isn't cutting it. And it's clear. And we've laid that out in our report.
Hi there, it's Lindsay Armstrong with the Canadian Press. I'm wondering why you made the decision not to directly recommend that the RCMP abandon its role in contract policing, and why leave that up to government to consider and decide on instead.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We thought that may be putting the cart before the horse, because one of our primary focuses is community safety, and that involves much more than policing. So it's a two-step process, really, and our report lays that out. It's a two-step. First of all, we have to transform the role of policing, not just the RCMP, but the role of policing in Canada. Its role, its very important role, but people are defaulting to police. We are all defaulting to police to do things that they shouldn't have to do, and they would agree with that. So this probably the simplest thing we could have done was a recommendation like that, but the first thing you have to do is identify what their role would be, and then, and we say this in our report, then you're equipped to say, okay, what's the role of the RCMP in this province? Now that we've identified what the role of, how community safety is best achieved, once you do that, you identify the role of policing, then you identify the role of the RCMP. It would be starting with the second step, if you will, as opposed to the first step. Thank you.
Are you concerned at all that in the meantime, there will be continual issues in the contract policing model?
Well, we've, I think it was Haley Creighton, I think, spoke to us several times. They're looking for, they're working on minimum standards, and I can't recall the exact deadline, but I knew it was imminent that they would be releasing it. They have done and are doing steps to address the obvious concerns that the mass casualty revealed. One immediate step, let me just say, is, and it's in our report, but one immediate step is interoperability and cooperation among police chiefs, municipal and RCMP in this province, and to work together and to cooperate and to get it together, if you will. And I'm hoping that if that's not started, it better start. And so again, I think there are steps being taken to address that, but bottom line is, I think we really have to look at the recommendation that we have to take a good hard look at what policing should look like in Nova Scotia, and then you decide who does it.
Go ahead.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you for this. Callum Smith with Global News. I guess I just wonder, building on your point, Commissioner MacDonald, we've heard plenty of tension between the RCMP and in particular two municipal forces. I was going to ask, have you heard anything from either the new top-ranking Mounties in Nova Scotia or the municipal forces to indicate there has been progress? And how confident are you that there will be progress on their relationships?
Second one first, I am confident. Infrastructurally or structurally, we wouldn't be in a position to hear. You know, we had our proceedings, they ended, and we've been writing the report. I know there's new leadership within the RCMP in this province. I remain hopeful, but I'm not aware of an update unless I missed it. Go ahead.
I could just follow up to that. It's critical when we look at making some of these systemic and institutional changes that we don't look at the simple solutions. And it's easy to say, this is something that's happened in the province of Nova Scotia, and we have fixed it because we have new leaders in place and we've transferred people. The issues are much broader than that, and I dare say isn't restricted just to the province of Nova Scotia. There has to be a change in policing culture around interoperability, not only with other police agencies, not just between police agencies, but with other public safety partners. And I think that if we look at it just province by province or division by division, I think that we're really missing out on the bigger picture. And it's imperative that going forward, there is a culture shift around the shared responsibility, collaboration, information sharing, and a willingness to work together. And most importantly, building trust among all of those law enforcement and public safety partners and our community organizations.
Thank you for that. Commissioner MacDonald, you've mentioned your mandate has been broad with an ambitious timeline. You've mentioned that multiple times. Did those elements hinder your work in any way, or did you think the mandate was too broad?
Mandate was definitely not too broad. Everything we looked at had to be looked at. One of our recommendations is to, on a confidential basis, have a better plan for fulfilling the mandate and more input in fulfilling the mandate. Having said that, we got it all done. We got it all done. We did it. It came at a cost to our team. It came at a cost to participants. It came at a cost to participants' council. It came at a cost to the media in terms of, volumes and volumes of documents to review, but we got it done. So absolutely, the mandate was the appropriate mandate, for sure.
I think we have a call on from the phone line from Michael MacDonald with Canadian Press.
I can't find my...
We can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity. Commissioner MacDonald, the reports that you issued today have called for changes to RCMP oversight in particular. What is the most important change that you would like to see on that front?
What struck me during the proceedings was that the civilian, I'm probably going to get the name wrong, but the Civilian Oversight Review Board for the RCMP was budget dependent. In other words, we will look into something if we have the money. Now, I realize you can't give a board a blank check, but there has to be some kind of independent way to make sure that they are, objective way, I should say, to make sure that they are independent enough to investigate what they feel they ought to investigate. And surely bad police behavior cannot be sacrificed at the altar of not having a budget. I mean, that's, if your question is, what's the most important thing? That's the most important thing in my view.
Michael, did you have a follow-up?
The final report says there needs to be a greater focus on addressing and preventing the root causes of violence in communities. It says that over and over again. What does that look like in terms of actual changes that people can understand?
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. It's Commissioner Fitch. I'll take that one for starters. When we talk about violence prevention, we also talk about it in terms of a public health approach. And we have to address the root causes of violence because, as we know, it spills out. And to use the metaphor we had for the commission, the ripple impact that violence has in our communities. And it has to start at a very fundamental level. And I've often said, you have to have safe homes and safe individual relationships in order to have safe communities, because it really, literally and figuratively bleeds out from individual relationships that go wrong. And we've seen in our report, and we laid it out in terms of the perpetrator's background, generational patterns of violent behavior. And Commissioner MacDonald mentioned in our opening remarks, right? He came from a violent, traumatic childhood, and it made him into a violent man. Now, do all violent people go on to commit atrocities, such as mass casualties? No. But we know that violence and harm impacts our children every day. And it influences communities and families and schools and workplaces. But it takes all of us. And I can tell you from my policing experience how painful it was over the years to see people slow down and, pardon the expression, but would rubberneck at traffic accidents. Everybody would slow down, take a look. They talk about the accident. You read about it in the headlines. When it comes to intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, family violence, people still, in this day and age, look away. People still look away. And that allows that harm and violence to continue to seep out into our communities. And we really, truly believe that the best approach to stopping violence and to preventing mass casualties to the best of our collective ability is from a whole of society response. And that is beginning with prevention of violence first.
We have time for just one more question. Oh, Brett's already got dibs.
Sorry, just drilling down back into that idea of a holistic approach. For folks who are watching this, who aren't a politician, who aren't upper management for RCMP, the majority of folks watching and listening, what can they do today? What can they do right now in response to your report?
Commissioner Stanton, would you like to take that one?
Well, just even with what Commissioner Fitch was just saying, we have a whole section on bystander intervention. So people can choose not to look away. People can choose to intervene. So we talk about prevention, we talk about early intervention, and we talk about if things don't get prevented, how to have a better critical incident response. But people can take part of what we've done here is said, let's take responsibility for one another in our communities, in our homes. And we can all say when we're seeing something that shouldn't be happening, and how can we help those people to be in a healthier place. So there is a focus in this on taking responsibility and caring for one another. And that's something we can all do. We don't need a government to tell us to do that.
Commissioners, if you're okay, we're going to take one more, then we're done.
Thank you. One of the recommendations, to follow up on Brett's point, is not directed at government or policing, but on individuals, particularly men. And you're calling on them to take up individual and concerted action against what you call the epidemic of gender-based violence. What do you want them to do?
I was struck by Sue Bookchin of Be the Peace in a September group session that we had, participant group session, and she said, it's time for men to step up like the men in this room. And I was a man in the room. And what it means is to get help, educate yourself, be humble and honest with yourself. And I think men have a leader, like women have been carrying through community-based organizations the burden of protecting women almost exclusively for far too long. It's time for men to step up in leadership roles and speak out. We spoke out in our report. I'm speaking out now. So men who would be perpetrators, we have to educate. We have to have services available for them. But men who are leaders in society have to call it out for what it is. It's an epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.